Today we have Gerry Milnes and Mike Miller. They're both here to play some amazing music for you guys. And there is an Elkins Barn Dance Collective Square Dance coming up that Miller will be calling. So we hope you guys can come to that as well. He'll tell you more details on where its location is.
So the situation is there's no sound. If anybody wants to bring their chairs right up here so you can hear, I'd encourage it. Come on up. Right up here.
And that dance that Danny mentioned is Thursday, tomorrow, May 29th in the Davis and Elkins-Beverly on campus. 7 o'clock.
I'm going to blame Emily Goodman for putting in the paper that I'm an Elkins legend. I think I'm more like an Elkins antique. Push an 80. I went into an antique store the other day and they wouldn't let me leave. How many people remember Woody Simmons?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We're going to start off. Woody always came to Pick It in the Park, and then the tune that he always started off with was Sugar Tree Stomp. So we're going to try the Sugar Tree Stomp. Still live down in Mill Creek. Remember Woody going through Mill Creek on his motorcycle, standing up playing the fiddle. I met Woody in 1975 and spent a lot of time with him, learned a lot of music from him. He told me that he used to play on the radio over in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And he would play there at night, and he'd have to drive home late at night. And one night he got out of the radio station and started for home, and the transmission went out on his car. The only gear he had was reverse. So he drove from Harrisonburg to Mill Creek in reverse, and he said he passed cars on cheap milk. just outside of Mill Creek who played banjo. His name was Cletus Johnson. And Cletus and his brother, Arthur D. Johnson, both played real good banjo players. And Cletus would say, I'm going to play one that I deranged myself. So we're going to play one of his tunes called Getting Upstairs. Cletus's wife was a real character. Her name was Lou. She was a real old-time person, and Cletus would sing, "Hello, Lou, I'm gone. Hello, Lou, I'm gone. Hello, Lou, to feed the sheep when I'm dead and gone." Another fellow that learned a lot of music off of was Glenn Smith. We had him over here to Augusta several times. And Glenn played a lot of great fiddle tunes. So I'm going to try one of his tunes here, one called Smith's Reel. And Mike's the best backup man in the business. He does a great job on backup guitar. Jammed full of stuff. And he started rooting around trying to find this fiddle. And he said, "You couldn't cuss a cat in here without getting hair in your teeth." He was telling me about an old fellow one time who wasn't very good with the truth. And he said, I wouldn't believe that fellow if his tongue was notarized. Glenn said one time he was playing at he used to play at the restaurants a lot. And he was playing fiddle tunes there. And an old woman came way up in the front. She just kept staring at him and staring at him. finally, Glenn said, do you know who I am? You thought maybe they were neighbors or something. Do you know who I am? She said, no, but if you get down to the nurse's station, they can tell you. Another fellow who played a lot of music around here was Blackie Cool. Blackie was a great, great guitar player. But he was also a good fiddle player. And I learned some tunes off Blackie. I'll try one of those. He played one called West Virginia Virgin. Quite a character. When I knew him, he was about 80 years old, and I knocked on his door. Somebody told me he played the guitar. And like he came to the door, and I said, I hear that you play the guitar and play music. He said, oh, no, I haven't played in 20 years. And then finally I talked him to get his guitar, and he went in the back room and brought it out, and it was in perfect tune. And he played great. Another fellow that's been around Augusta a lot, and he came almost every year when Margot Blevin was director, was Melvin Mine. And I got to spend a lot of time with Melvin. He got to travel a lot. We played out all on the West Coast and everywhere on the East Coast and places in between. We were at a festival one time in New Mexico, and there was a harmonica player on the stage, and his name is Mark Graham. Some of you may know that. He's a pretty famous harmonica player. But he would tell these stories and blow the harp, and he'd be jumping around and dancing and carrying on. And Melvin leaned over to me and said, I'd like to cage that guy up and haul him from town to town. So we'll try one of Melvin's old-time tunes called Hey Aunt Katie, There's a Bug on Me. he had to help his father, who was a cleared land people. And so he just never could go to school. He never learned to read or write. So I remember one time he was at Augusta, and he could write his name, but somebody brought one of his albums over to him to sign. So Melvin took the album and said, "Why don't you write it?" But he did write it. Melvin played a tune that he didn't know the name of. He learned it from his father. And I learned the tune from him, and I played it from my old friend who lived up in Huttonville named Elkins-Beverly. And Current said to me, I said, "Current, you know the name of that tune?" He said, "That's A Rainy Day." And I thought, well, Current's always had an answer for everything. I'm not sure that's really A Rainy Day. But years later, an Irish music scholar came to Augusta, and by this time, Kearns had passed away, but I played the tune for him, and he said, "That's The Rainy Day." Sorry, Kearns. We'll try that. I learned from Melvin line called Rainy Day. Clarence Evans was a good friend. I met him in 1975 when I lived in Huttonville. I wasn't in prison. I'll try to tune out. I heard Melvin Line play this melody, and I really liked when he played it. And then I heard Clarence Evans sing the words. And he called it The Moonshiner. So we'll try that one. is as sweet as the dew on the vine. God bless that moonshiner, gonna wish he was mine. She tore out his pockets and sewed up the seam. She fed that moonshiner on sweet milk and cream, and his breath was as sweet as the dew on the vine. God bless that moonshiner, gonna wish he was mine. He'll go back up some holler and set up his till. He'll sell you a gallon for $2 bill. But his breath is as sweet as the dew on the vine. God bless that moonshiner, wish he was mine. Kearns was he was a moonshiner, and a ballad singer, and a banjo player, and a storyteller. And a neighbor told me this one time, that the old guys in Hudsonville used to go down to the post office because the mail car came from Elkins and dropped the mail off. So around 10 o'clock in the morning, they'd all be hanging out there telling tales. And he said one time Kearns came in and he said, and he'd been out that morning and killed a whole mess of squirrels. And the season wasn't over yet. Kearns didn't pay a lot of attention to the game laws. Well, there was a strange guy in there that morning, and he heard Kearns say that he killed a mess of squirrels that morning, and he said, "Do you know who I am?" And Kearns said, "No." He said, "I'm the game warden." Kearns said, "Do you know who I am?" The guy said, "No." He said, "I'm the biggest liar in Randolph County." When I used to live down right near Braxton County, I played a lot with an old lady fiddler who was the square dance fiddler in Braxton County. Her name was Sarah Singleton. And learned some tunes from Sarah, so we'll try one of those. She told us an old skedaddle. southern West Virginia, where I used to visit. And if you're a fan of old-time music or bluegrass music, you've probably heard the tune Reuben's Train 100 times. But this fellow's name was William May, and he said that Reuben, his name was actually Reuben Meade. He said he came from Naugatuck, West Virginia. And he ran the train from Naugatuck to Wayne, West Virginia. And he said, he sang all these words about this fellow, Reuben Meade. He said he died and was buried on Marrowbone, on a dry Marrowbone hill. Marrowbone Creek is in Mingo County. And in the words it says that the night that Reuben died, Mandy wrung her hands and cried. So I went up Marrowbone Creek just a couple years ago and found the Meade Cemetery. Most of the stones were just rough field stones, but there was one stone that was Amanda Meade, who I guess was the Mandy in the song. But anyway, William sang this old song called Reuben's Train. Another old timer that I learned a lot of tunes from was Mose Kaufman down in, at the end of his life down in Sweet Springs, West Virginia. And he was in a restaurant there. Last time I went to see him, he was out in what they call the solarium. There's all kinds of people with problems there, talking to themselves and carrying on. Mose said, let's go back to the room and play some music. So we went back. Mose was over 90 anyway. He had a shake. I helped him get out of his wheelchair, and he's reaching for the bed. He said, now just wait till I get a death grip on him. He said that he went up to the Shenandoah Valley one time to visit some relatives. And he said they had a big dairy farm. He said they had cheese. He said they made all kinds of cheese. He said they made salt cheese. They made cottage cheese. They made hard cheese. He said they ate cheese for breakfast. They ate cheese for lunch. Cheese for supper. He said I had to block off my backside to keep the mice out. Here's a tune you notice playing. It's called Snowbird on the Ash Bank. Another friend of ours is a guy named Jimmy Costa. Some of you know, met Jimmy, and he's been to Augusta several times. He lives down in near Hinton, West Virginia. But Mike and I just recently learned a great old-time waltz from Jimmy. It's called Rock Old Babies to Sleep. he lives in an old log house. And he was putting a new tin roof on. He said, the only thing I was wearing, he said, was a pair of good overalls. And he said, I was down at this end, I had the ladder way down on this end. He said, I was nailing on this tin roof. He said, and lo and behold, I nailed my overalls to the roof. He said, my only way to get out was to crawl out of my overalls and inch my way all the way down the roof to the ladder down on the other end. He said, but it just so happened that the neighbor right up the road was having a yard sale. And all these cars came streaming by. I gave him a big show there. Another fiddler friend of mine, and Jimmy's too. Jimmy spent a lot of time with a man named Frank George. Frank was a great fiddle player, a great banjo player. He'd been to Augusta over the years. I learned some tunes from Frank. We'll try one he called Johnny Coke. Johnny Coke was an English officer way back in the 1500s. And there's a big story about Johnny Coke that I won't go into here, but he called this tune Johnny Coke. Some of you might remember Phyllis Marks, who came to Augusta several times. Phyllis was a great old-time singer. She sang these long ballads, with 25 verses, which I'll spare you of. And she had a great sense of humor. I remember we'd go there on a summer day, and we went to leave, she'd say, now don't rush off in the heat of the day without a blanket. One time she said to me, love's a little thing that's shaped like a lizard. It wraps its tail around your heart and nibbles on your razor. And Phyllis's husband, Jesse, he was a great old guy. He was a singer too. He was a Shakedown singing school teacher. And so I got to know Jesse pretty well. And maybe I'll sing a little song I learned from Jesse. This will give you an idea of his sense of humor. Talk about a man having trouble. I've had some, you bet. My wife, she had a birthday party. There was some things I had to get. I went into find there's something there. Had to find some women's clothes, some shoes and silk hose, and lots of other things that women wear. I went into the store, so crowded I could hardly get through. I went up to the counter, I didn't hardly know what to do. Along came a pretty little sales girl. She said, "Man, why do you stare?" I said, "I want some women's clothes, some shoes and silk hose, and lots of other things that women wear." Talk about a pretty little girl. This one sure was a peach. Clothes were on the top shelf. They were too high for her to reach. She stood up upon a chair there, and she fell, I do declare. Then I saw some women's clothes, some shoes and silk hose, and lots of other things that women wear. Bernie Carpenter was a great old friend. He lived down in Braxton County near where I did. And he played a tune called Sheldon Rock. And the very first baby born, white baby born in central West Virginia was born under this rock. It was his great-great-grandfather who was born. And they were hiding out from Indians at the time. And I've taken some Augusta classes down there. And we went to the rock and played the tune under the rock. But Ernie Carpenter took me up there first. And he was real proud of his family's history. The Carpenters were the first settlers down on Elk River back at that time, about 1782. And we'll try to play this tune called Sheldon Rock. And Tim O'Brien called me, if you know who he is, some of you do, a while back, and said, "You have a recording of Ernie telling the story." And I did, but it had been altered and it wasn't too good. But he said he wanted to play the tune on the record that he was about to make. And I heard how he played it. He kind of played it like a ragtime tune, and I thought he kind of missed the whole point. The original tune, the way Ernie Carpenter played it, it sounded like the frontier days in 1782. Anyway, here's the Sheldon Rock. Washington, D.C. one time to play for the Washington Folklore Society. And we were trying to find this place. We went through a really rough neighborhood. It was really rough. There was people stretched out on the sidewalk. Ernie was looking at this, he said, "This looks like every man for himself and the devil take them all." We're about to wind up here, so we'll play one last old-time country waltz. It's called The Rose of Sharon. And notice Mike's great guitar work on this tune.